Good morning. Welcome to the Crimewatch Roadshow for the month of June. We are out and about bringing Crimewatch to you. This morning, Rav, where are you?
Good morning, Sophie. Yes, this morning I'm outside Cardiff Central Station in Wales, and all month we're up and down the country tackling those crimes that are affecting all of us, whether it be the cannabis farmers you're going to see today, to robbers, burglars, shoplifters, car vandals. With a bit of help from you at home, we're going to try and solve it.
We've got cases from all over the UK, so if you can help, please do get dialing. Coming up, this victim's neighbour said they'd give him a cigarette, but they gave him a broken arm instead. When he opened the door, they set upon him with baseball bats. If you know who this man is, do let us know. And the story of a whole village left out in the cold by thieves. All that coming up. But first, Rav, you're looking for some farmers this morning.
Well, they're not your average type of farmers, Sophie. No, these are large-scale cannabis farmers, and so far the South Wales Police are really cracking down on this. This year alone, they've got over £5 million worth of the drug off of the streets, which is a fantastic result. But these guys are not tucked away in the valleys in some farm. They could, in fact, be working in a street just like yours.
Summertime in the leafy suburbs of Swansea, the season for putting out your hanging baskets. After all, you need to keep up with the Joneses. But the police are hunting for some pretty exotic gardeners who certainly don't want you to see what they're growing.
Open it up.
Cannabis farmers are turning normal residential homes into drug dens, and there could be one on your street. This woman rented out her home in Swansea, but all wasn't as it seemed.
I bought the house for an investment, so the plan was to rent it out. A couple came round, and they said it was for their children and them, and that he worked in a hotel and restaurant, and basically they wanted to bring up their children in this area. They would go into the bank and pay by cash, put the money straight into my account every month on time.
They seemed like perfect tenants, so what came next was a real surprise.
I had a phone call from the police asking me if I was the owner of this property. I said yes, and they explained that there'd been a professional job, they'd been growing cannabis in here on a large scale.
The family she thought she was renting to turned out to be a front for cannabis farmers so they could get access to her house.
We finding that these sort of crime gangs have come into the city and I've made large amounts of money from these cannabis factories. And in turn, the problems that brings, we've had people being brought in from places like Vietnam and used as gardeners within those addresses.
A large-scale cannabis farm in a residential house causes serious damage, leaving the landlord with a repair bill that can run into thousands of pounds.
Well, when I first came in, everywhere was in complete darkness. All of the windows had this silver taping up with plastic sheeting over. In here it was just really dirty. There was all moisture up the wall from the plants and the condensation. The person that was growing the plants lived downstairs, and all of the upstairs was full of plants. There was soil in every crack in the house. It was just devastating. The whole room has had to be gutted. You can just see down here just some of the condensation that was all up the walls. The wallpaper had come off the walls because it was so hot in here. The bath and the basin was totally discoloured because they was putting their chemicals into the bath, and it was full of feeder in here and sprinklers. This compost came from some of the plant pots were still up in the bedrooms. So what we're doing at the moment, there's a big plastic sheet under here. Instead of carrying them all the way outside, we're just tipping it out on them so we can sort of lift it up and take it down. They lied to me. At the end of the day, I thought there was a family living here, and it turns out there was just one person living here growing weed in here.
That Vietnamese grower won't be wrecking any more houses, as he received an 18-month sentence and will be deported when he gets out. But as you'll see later, the search goes on, with the police continuing to seek out more cannabis farms.
And we're going to have more on those raids from Swansea later on. But first, this is PC Paul Krauser from the Dog Training Unit, who's doing some work looking for drugs today. Paul, what are we doing?
Yeah, that's right. We're down at a live training venue here down at Cardiff Central Railway Station, doing a training exercise with the dogs on the build-up to the busiest day of the year, which is the Escape to the Park event down at Swansea.
So the dogs are actually sniffing for any controlled substances at the moment. There's a lot of people coming through, so it's really going to test the nerves of the dog. And somewhere amongst here, I know you've put an actual stooge, haven't you? One of your own officers.
That's right. The chap coming through in red is one of our PCs, one of our dog handlers. The dog is actually trained to scan the air around the person, not the person itself. As soon as he locates a smell,
now what's happening
there
here?
We are.
Yeah.
The dog will now block the person's way.
Yeah.
I will come along and I will reward
you've
the dog
rewarded
with his
it with a ball. Fantastic.
He's performed the exercise correctly and his reward is the ball.
Now the dog sitting down would give you the officers grounds to do a search then, wouldn't it?
That's
so
correct.
It's a really important tool.
Like I said, the dog is actually scanning the air around the person as opposed to searching the person itself. Once the dog's indicated the presence of a prohibited substance, that will give us the grounds then to stop that person and to conduct a further search of them.
Well, it worked well then. Good luck with the rest of today.
Thank you.
Well done, Wilco. And back to you in the studio, Sophie.
Rav, thank you. Well, also coming up on this morning's show, Penny Roberts, who's chief reporter for the BBC's Wales Today programme on the theft that's left a whole community rather chilly.
Good morning, Sophie. And this morning I'm at Cwmtwch Community Hall and I'm certainly getting a very warm welcome from the Village Coffee Club. But it hasn't always been the case because just a few months ago, thieves put this hall and everything that goes on here in jeopardy.
Penny, thank you. Well, also coming out, bred for aggression. Many dogs and their owners terrorise the streets. Dean Jackson Matthew knows only too well the damage they can do as his 4-year-old daughter, Gracie, was attacked whilst playing in the park and she very nearly lost her eye. The owner and his dog are still at large. Maybe someone out there will know where they are. Also, will you know any of this lot? They are all wanted by police up and down the UK. But first, caught on camera doing things they shouldn't. Anyone look familiar?
2 robberies at one amusement arcade in Shepherd's Bush, West London. This one's from March, and this one's from just earlier this month. Police believe this is the same guy. Come on, shaving off the beard isn't fooling anyone. Both times, one bloke has cased the joint alone before returning with backup to threaten staff with a screwdriver and clean out the safe. Staff were then made to wait in the basement until they'd made a getaway. During the latest robbery, they held a customer hostage, hit a member of staff, and one of them had a knife. Who knows what they'll do next? They've already hit twice in just 2 months. Don't let it happen again. 2 o'clock in the morning at these flats in Farnborough, Hampshire last August, and this lad is after a cigarette. Some men in a flat nearby say they'll give him one, and they're not kidding. They answer the door with baseball bats and go for him, smacking him so hard they break his arm. Pointless, mindless violence, and completely unprovoked. How long till this yob strikes again? Fareham Shopping Centre last September, and this elderly lady is going about her daily business. First stop, the bank. She joins the queue and then asks the cashier to withdraw 300 quid. But she's not alone. This man is watching closely. He follows her out of the bank and into Boots next door. Once inside, he makes his move. Joined by 3 mates, 2 keep lookout while the rest surround her, squirt chilli sauce in her face, then nick her purse. She's 85. How low can you get? Know them, shop them.
Well, if you recognise anyone, please do call us. The numbers are on screen throughout the show. Your call really could make the difference. Our number is 08000 468 999, or you can also text us on 63399. Text CW space and then your message, and don't forget to leave the space or your message will not get through. Now, here are some of the cases that we covered last week in the northwest of England. On the case that we featured last Thursday about a pub landlord attacked for the takings in his own pub car park, you'll remember that the robbers drove straight at him. Well, we've had a call giving names for the offenders. Police are following that up. and on the hit and run case that we featured on Friday, in which Moira Hagman was killed by a motorist. We've had a sighting of a car that might have been involved. Please do keep your calls coming. We really do want to hear from you. Well, this week, the Crimewatch Roadshow is live from South Wales. But what kind of crime can we expect to find? The BBC's chief reporter for Wales Today, Penny Roberts, is with us all week and knows more than most about the crimes that really affect people in this neck of the woods. Hello, Penny.
Bore da, Sophie, croeso. Good morning and welcome to Wales, the only part of the UK that's officially bilingual. And it's certainly a place that's got two sides to its character, no more so than here in South Wales. From the cosmopolitan cities of Cardiff and Swansea to the valley towns of the Rhondda and the farming communities of the Vale of Glamorgan. Here are some of my highs and my lows.
This has been my patch for 20 years, and in that time I've covered all the major crime stories.
At this stage, detectives are not linking Karen Skipper's murder with that of Geraldine Polk.
The judge, Mr. Justice Curtis, said they'd committed a brutal and pitiless murder.
Well, here in Blaenau, the whole community is deeply shocked by today's events.
When I started reporting, ASBOs hadn't been thought of. DNA profiling was in its infancy. And this iconic building wasn't even a glint in the developer's eye.
And as I was cutting my teeth as a reporter, Peter Vaughan was a bobby on the beat. Now he's Deputy Chief Constable of South Wales Police.
Half the population of Wales live within our area. Unfortunately, half the crime that goes on in Wales also happens in our area. 2 million calls for assistance, 523,000 incidents. So that's one incident every minute of every day. So it makes for an exciting challenge for us.
Local lad Howard Marks was Britain's and America's most wanted man in the 1990s. He's believed to have smuggled a tenth of the world's cannabis. When he was finally sentenced to 25 years, I was there.
The events in this Florida courthouse have brought an abrupt end to Marx's anarchic career. A final chapter too for the undercover agents who tracked and caught him in the first international operation of its kind.
Marijuana is harmless. Peace and love, if you like. I'm still a firm believer in that.
20 years on, and cannabis is still a problem in South Wales, but it's one the police are determined to crack. Last year, they stopped £18.5 million worth of the drug from hitting the streets. Drugs and drink are a major headache for the police in Wales. It's estimated that their misuse costs the country £2 billion a year. So, on a Friday and Saturday night, there are now double the amount of officers working the beat to keep the peace. And Swansea used to be the car crime capital of Britain, but the latest figures show that car crime has actually fallen by 20% in the past year.
But perceptions of crime don't always match reality.
If you're going to go up the shop, we'll go in twos or in groups or whatever, because we don't want to be walking around here on our own.
My dread is somebody stealing my car.
Our street's been burgled about 2-3 times in the last year or so.
Any victim of crime is one victim too many, and having sort of fairly recently had family experience of a dwelling house burglary, the impact is absolutely massive. And what we're trying to do is we're working closely with our partners. We're making sure houses are more difficult to break into. We're being far smarter with the way that we deal with forensic opportunities. And for example, we can get back, if DNA is taken from a dwelling house burglary, if a fingerprint is taken from there, we can get the identification of that person to an officer on the street within about an hour now. We've got to sustain what we do well. We've got to continue to police the events in the way that we police them. We've got to continue with the performance improvements. They've been great, but we can't sit back and sit in our laurels with those.
As the chief reporter for Wales Today, I'm always on the lookout for the next big story.
Over the next week, I'll be reporting live from all over South Wales. This place behind me is Cardiff Crown Court, and I'm hoping that with your help and the leads you give us, I'll be back here over the months to come when the criminals are brought to justice.
Penny, thank you. Now, will you know any of the UK's most wanted? Chances are they could be hiding anywhere. First up this morning is this man, Declan Roddy. Police would like to speak to him about a fraud in which students, families and landlords were conned into paying deposits for properties they never got. He's also wanted in connection with benefit fraud. Police believe Roddy is living in the London area. Perhaps you've seen him. Face number 2. Police are anxious to speak to this man, David William Pugh, regarding witness intimidation and a very serious sexual assault. Pugh failed to appear at Swansea Crown Court for trial and hasn't been seen since. He could be living in Spain, possibly Benidorm. If you've spotted him, do give us a call. Number 3, this is Abigail Taylor, who South Wales Police would like to talk to in connection with an attempted fraud last summer. A bank account holder's post was redirected and personal details stolen. A transfer of £14,000 was then made to a fraudulent account. Well, if you've seen her, do give us a call. And number 4, police in the Vale of Glamorgan would like information on this man, Hussein Bekem, who is wanted in connection with a serious fraud. Police believe he has either left the country or is living in the London area where he has many contacts. Have you seen him? If you know where they are, where they're hiding, call or text the numbers on the screen. And if you want another look, go to bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch Roadshow. Now to a strange case in a village in South Wales where thieves left a whole community shivering when a whole tank of heating oil was stolen. Cwmtwch in the Swansea Valley, a village where everyone knows everyone. But one crime nearly broke the heart of this small community.
It's just stupid thing to do because it's affecting the entire community, it's not just a building, it's where the entire community comes together.
It's sad day when people are looking for places, I guess, to try and make a few bob. It's sad.
You know, I'd rather have asked these criminals to ask for money or else they would take the oil.
This hall is the heart of the village, hosting 11 community groups a week. For hundreds of people, it's an irreplaceable part of their lives.
It's somewhere for everybody to know they can come if they need a place or a venue to do anything, really.
This hall is the centre of activity for the Cwmtwch inhabitants.
All the children from the area come together, and even though they're not all in the same school, they can all come here and mix and have fun. And we have competitions sometimes in discos, and we just all enjoy to come together and do normal children stuff.
The hall relies on charitable donations just to stay afloat, and it's a struggle to balance the books.
We do a lot of work in this hall, and it's rattling tins and looking for grants. All voluntary workers. Nobody in this hall gets paid a penny.
Everyone from 6-month-old babies to 90-year-old pensioners uses this hall, so it's essential that it's kept warm. Last September was the coldest for 15 years, so heating costs were running very high.
Our last oil bill was, I think it was around £500 for about 6 weeks period.
This hall can be very, very cold, I can assure you, because what we do now, we come up in the winter sometimes and put the heating on at 3 o'clock to make sure the hall is warm enough for us to come up and practice.
But the warmth of the choir wasn't a concern to some uninvited late-night visitors.
We realised that we didn't have any heating in the hall, and we didn't have any hot water for the coffee morning. And just by chance, we went round the back to see, how much oil we had, and the pipe had been broken.
They damaged the pipe which goes up here, and broke it. And they took all the oil out.
The theft hit the community hard. They lost £500 of oil and had to pay nearly £400 to safeguard the tank. But it was closing the hall that could have the greatest impact.
We had to close the hall to everything, well, for about 3 weeks.
All the activities had to cease. The hall was closed.
It's sad, really, that people out there are coming here looking to take oil from a community, from an organisation who serves the community.
They obviously don't really care about other people, and it's really affected everyone, so they just can't care about other people. They can't have much of a conscience, can they?
It's heartbreaking because you don't want to turn people away. The more people we can get in here, the more revenue we've got. And when you turn people away, they don't always come back.
It's really affected the whole village, Penny.
It certainly has, Sophie. This is a very close-knit community and lots of things had to be put on hold. Well, I'm delighted to be joined this morning by one of the villagers. He's also one of our rugby greats. He's Clive Rowlands, former Wales captain, former British Lions manager and former Wales coach. Clive, this place is very dear to you. What do you think of the thieves who did this?
Oh, the first incident is an awful thing to do, really, because this is the centre of the community. And when you think there's so many activities that take place here, suddenly no oil, no heat, no choir practice, no youth club. And this affects the what goes on in the village itself. And I would say to people, they only thought before they do these awful things, and rather sad, I think.
Now, you've travelled all over the world, but you've always come back to Cumtoch. What does this hall mean to you?
Well, I was born in the street right opposite the welfare hall, and there's so many activities, and people work so hard to keep these places going in community. It's a centre of the village, and whatever goes on in the village goes on in this particular hall. And it's been very, very kind to me and everybody who lives in the village.
Clive, thank you. Well, I'm with PC Rob Chapman too. Rob, you know this place better than most. What do you think the thieves did with this oil?
Well, they've either obviously taken it to resell to other people, they could use it themselves in their own heating tanks, or possibly it will run a diesel engine car. So, you know, they could have used it for any of those purposes whatsoever.
Well, sadly, this isn't an isolated incident. More on that later. Sophie.
Penny, thank you very much. Now, keep your eyes peeled. You might just recognise one of our criminals caught on camera.
They're all masked up and ready for action. Well, not exactly all. As these three men begin to steal from this Lloyd's pharmacy in Chislehurst, we get a nice clear picture of this one's muck. They manage to get away with hundreds of pounds worth of goods as they trolley around the chemist filling their sacks. Someone knows who they are. Pick up the phone. It's early December at Hathaway Store, Stratford, London, and these turkeys are stocking up for an early Christmas lunch. They spend around 150 quid, but end up with a lot more using distraction tactics. They buy lots of little items using all the small change they can muster, which keeps the cashier counting. They communicate by mobile phone as their hoard gets bigger. We can't let them get away with this supermarket sweep. So if you know them, get on the phone. These two like the idea of spending other people's money. They're at Asda Main Road, Bilton Hull in January, and the police would like a word. Shop staff discovered a piece of equipment fitted to the ATM that reads account details and PIN numbers. This lot didn't get away with anything on this occasion, but we need to stop them in their tracks. They appear to be of Eastern European appearance and fit the description of guys who've committed this type of offence in other parts of the country. Do you know who they are? Let's catch them quick. You win some, you lose some, and this bloke seems to be losing big time. He's in Paddy Power, Beckenham, and Lady Luck seems to have walked out and left him on his own. He lobs a chair, causing some criminal damage. What a bad loser. Who is he?
Definitely caught on camera. Well, if you recognise anyone, call us. The numbers are on the screen. Or if you would like to remain anonymous, call the independent charity Crime Stoppers. Let me give you their number. It's 0800 555 111. Now, a quick update on our progress so far. We've had a call from somebody in Colchester in Essex who was watching the piece about cannabis farms and says that they think the telltale signs of a cannabis farm are showing next door to them. So they think they may well have a cannabis farm there. The police will get the details of that. We've also had a few more calls about cases we featured last week. One of the wanted faces. We've had a sighting. We've been given an address and that has been passed to the police, and also a name in connection with a CCTV of an assault on a bus just before Christmas. Keep your calls coming. Still ahead, police discover a cannabis farm in a house in Swansea. It's a high-tech professional setup.
As you can see, the lighting, the air vents going into the ceiling. There's a hydroponic setup with the water going through the tank there just behind the door. And then the plants are in the plastic containers on the bottom, which the water is going all the way through.
Right now, though, I'm joined by Dean Jackson Matthew and PC Emma Cole, who's investigating this next case. Just a few weeks ago, Dean's daughter Gracie was attacked and bitten by a dog whilst playing in a park near their home in Tunbridge Wells. Good morning to both of you. She's only 4 years old. What happened?
We went to the park after the nursery, what we normally do, with the 3 children. And we sat in the picnic area, and Grace was sitting down. I was playing frisbee with my middle child. And this dog comes over, which we've seen before, scruffy-looking, innocent-looking dog. And within seconds, next thing I know, Gracie's screaming. I turn round, and she's got blood pouring out the side of her face.
And she was incredibly lucky, wasn't she? Because, I mean, it's a bad bite, but
Yeah.
I mean, you can see there, I mean, it was not far from her eye.
Fortunately, she was lucky, and it could have been really, really, really serious.
And totally unprovoked.
Totally unprovoked, definitely.
Emma Cole, who are you looking for?
We're looking for a white male who we think is in his mid-40s, slim build. He was wearing a sand-coloured bomber-style jacket, khaki trousers and sand-coloured desert boots. But he was wearing a pork pie hat, under which we think he's got very short hair.
What about the dog, though?
The dog is a very scruffy, unkempt-looking dog.
And this is just a picture of the kind of dog you think it was?
Similar to that, yeah, just very scruffy-looking, crossbreed, we think.
But it's the back of the dog that's crucial.
Absolutely. It's a medium-sized dog that is dark brown, but the back half of the dog is actually looks like it's sun-bleached.
Yeah,
so
okay.
quite distinctive.
I got bitten by a dog. I was on my bike, riding through a park. This dog came out of nowhere, jumped up, grabbed my arm, and literally brought me to a halt. I didn't report it, and that's what happened to me, and it was a nasty, nasty bite. I didn't report it. I was really shocked. I didn't ask for any names or addresses. I just went home. And it was only a week later when everybody said to me, you've got to report it. That could have been a child like your child. Yeah. When do you report dog bites, and are they criminal offences, all of them?
Any of them. You
Really?
must report, yeah. To give us the best opportunity to investigate, just after it's happened is the best time. We can, contact CCTV, our local partners, get dog wardens, park wardens involved, and local officers. And without that being reported, we don't know about it. There's nothing we can do.
So it is a crime, being bitten by a dog. And I just felt silly. I felt stupid. I hadn't got a name. I hadn't got an address. I hardly saw what the dog looked like. I was so shocked. But I should have gone immediately to the police, should
Absolutely. There's legislation that deals with these types of offences, and it can be any dog. It doesn't have to be a particular breed.
Now, Dean, tell us exactly where you were, what date was this?
It was the 8th of May, after nursery, so it's just gone 4 o'clock.
And the park?
Calverley Park, in the middle of Tunbridge Wells town.
Right. And you obviously want to talk to anybody who has any idea who this could have been. You think he's local, so who this was, who the dog is. And Gracie now, is she all right? Is she on the mend?
Yeah, she's still jolly and everything, and we have our own dog, who's a big part of the family. But she does mention quite frequently, why did he bite her, and have they caught her? And it's God looking for him.
And did the doctor say she's going to be scarred by this?
Yeah, it looks like she's going to be scarred for life. But what they said, when she's old enough, she can decide if she wants to have further plastic surgery to remove the scar from her face.
Well, let's hope she makes a really speedy recovery. Thank you very much for coming in this morning, both of you. And Dean would obviously really like you to help him find this man. If you can help, the numbers are on the screen now. But right now, let's go back to those raids in South Wales, and the police are looking for cannabis farmers who could be growing the drug in a house next door to you.
Welsh police are on the hunt for cannabis farms.
Open it up!
This woman thought she'd rented her home out to a decent family, but she'd been lied to.
I had a phone call from the police asking me if I was the owner of this property. I said yes, and they explained that there'd been a professional job, they'd been growing cannabis in here on a large scale.
It's a constant battle to stop cannabis growers, but it's one the police are tackling head-on.
When we get there, the intention is basically just to do what we call a soft knock, because at the end of the day, what we expect is large-size plants, electrical equipment, so they haven't got a chance really to flush, or they wouldn't flush them down the toilet, unlike other drugs raids.
But when they arrive, there's a small problem.
Basically what's happened, obviously we've knocked the door, the neighbours come out and informed us that the occupier has left them a note to say he's gone away for 3 weeks. Obviously our considerations are now to either force the door open. The fact is if he isn't there, he's not going to leave plants alone for 3 weeks. But obviously the other option is that somebody else could be back and forth to the address and looking after them for him.
They didn't need the battering ram, as his mother was on hand to let them in. And their suspicions were proved right.
As you can see, the lighting, the air vents going into the ceiling. There's a hydroponic setup with the water going through the tank there just behind the door. And then the plants are in the plastic containers on the bottom, which the water is going all the way through. Basically, we've got about 24 plants here with about 1 or 2 weeks growth. Obviously, you can see behind me, you've got the power packs, which obviously supply the power to the lamps. Timer switch there, so they come on. The lamps are set to come on at certain times and go off to assist the growth. As I mentioned earlier on, you've got the water tank there, feeding the water through into the bottom of the pads there, so they're getting water all the time. Obviously you've got the air vent then, taking the smell and the heat up through the loft hatch, through the filters. Obviously trying not to alert the neighbours.
The police estimate that when this crop was fully grown, it would have had a street value of up to £15,000.
Scenes of crime have just arrived now. What they're going to do for us on this occasion is photograph the house, the layout of the house, and obviously then concentrate on the bedroom itself where the cannabis plants are growing.
And after scenes of crime officers have left, the police must preserve the evidence.
So the rest of the plants here now will just be bagged up and stored until the end of any court case. They won't be produced in evidence. All we need is to take the sample plants.
After a successful raid, police started to dismantle the factory, making sure no more cannabis will be grown here.
The raid now is coming to an end. As you can see with the van, all the equipment is in there now. Some of it's going to be kept for court. Other items will be destroyed. All in all, good morning's work.
And one of the officers leading that clampdown against the cannabis farmers is with me now, DCI Stephen Benson-Davison. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, how do people spot if they've got a cannabis farmer?
I think it's important for landlords to recognise that their property may well be rented out for the purposes of developing a cannabis factory. So when they are renting the property out, make sure you confirm the identity of the people who are renting it, particularly through photographic identification is preferable. Right into the contract that you are going to be regularly attending and visiting the property to make sure that all is in order, and make sure the neighbours are aware that there are new people moved in, and ask them to keep an eye on the property for you.
So vetting's very, very important there for landlords. What about the average person in the street? How could they spot if there's one of these farms cropping up?
Well, the telltale signs are that generally the windows are blacked out, that there may be visitors back and forth the property at strange times of day and night, staying only for short periods of time while they water the plants or harvest the crop. There may be a considerable amount of building work going on at the property just after they move in. And indeed, as the property, as the cannabis grows, then there may well be strange smells coming from the property.
Now, this is a problem for both yourself and the community. Why is that?
Well, the cannabis that's grown in cannabis factories is generally 3 or 4 times stronger than cannabis resin. If there is a cannabis factory within the community, then availability of this cannabis is going to be that much more. And there's a clear danger that children and young people may be offered this drug, which is a clear risk, as cannabis is, of course, a gateway drug to other more harmful substances.
Well, if you've got cannabis farmers, you're going to have cannabis dealers. But what can the viewers actually do to help then?
If anybody has any concerns whatsoever about a cannabis factory within the community, please contact your local police station and report the matter. Or if they're concerned about their anonymity, then please contact the Crime Stoppers.
So there are options there available to them, and you are taking a hard stance on these. Thank you very much for joining us today. Back to you in the lovely warm studio.
Rav, when you were working as a police officer, did you come across many cannabis farms?
I did actually, yeah, and I'll tell you what, there's two things that stick in my mind about them. One's the smell, because when you go in one of these things, it smells like 50,000 gym socks, actually. They're absolutely pungent smell. And the other thing is that the farmer would often live in a tiny little mattress in the corner of one room, and everything else in the house would literally be wall-to-ceiling vegetation. It really is something else.
Amazing. And what I want to know as well is, how are those dogs doing inside the station?
They're doing all right, actually, yeah. They're getting very, very busy. They're really training well, and they've done a few stops.
Thank you very much. But now let's go and have a look and see if you know where any of this lot are. More of our most wanted faces. How about face number 5 down here? Cardiff Police would like to know the whereabouts of this woman, 23-year-old Sabina Yasmin. Now, she failed to appear at Cardiff Crown Court last November after being charged with conspiracy to murder. Face number 6, this is it's 36-year-old Robert Royden Worrell, who failed to turn up at Bridgend Magistrates Court last August. He's wanted for being in possession of a knife. Face number 7, Philip Ian Miles, is wanted in connection with theft offences by South Wales Police. He skipped bail last December, and there is now a warrant out for his arrest. Do you know where he is? And number 8, this is John Matthew Reddy. South Wales Police are looking for him. He failed to attend court last April for criminal damage and vehicle tampering. Well, you can check out these faces again on our website, bbc.co.uk/Crimewatch Roadshow. And if you know where they are or where they could be hiding, please do call us. The numbers are on screen right now. Now, we've heard about the community hall that had its heating oil stolen. Well, it seems it really isn't an isolated case. Have a look at this.
Just outside Carmarthen, pensioners Jackie and Ginger Peck came home after a relaxing New Year's break to a less than warm welcome.
We had such a good time up in my daughter's, and then you come home to 3 weeks of misery.
Their holiday was ruined by thieves who stole their entire supply of heating oil.
I think I got up about 2 o'clock in the morning to make a cup of tea and realised how cold it was. Looked at my Ray-Ban and I could see the needle down to 0, so I realised then something was wrong.
With temperatures at a bitter -3, thieves couldn't have struck at a worse time.
Well, we were freezing, to be honest with you. I mean, I was glad I was in work at part of the day, because at least I was warm then. But coming home to a cold house, well, it was horrible. I think I wore about 2 jumpers and a coat at sometimes. I don't think my husband was ever without a jacket and a heavy coat on.
They do have a wood-burning fire as well, but the theft had caught them off guard.
I look after my grandchildren, so the time that they came here when it was very cold, we had to light that, obviously, get some logs in, and we didn't have that many, to be honest with you. So a friend of mine gave us some pallets, and we broke those up and used those for a while.
The thieves had stolen £1,500 worth of oil from the tank outside their house.
You know, we saved hard for that money, and we do have to save through the year for our oil in winter time.
Dyfed-Powys Police are worried about isolated homes being targeted in this way.
We've had a rush of crimes in rural areas, I would say from the last week in December up until about mid-February. When the oil was being taken, the properties weren't being touched. Clearly they were targeting oil alone. There's no doubt about that. We've had a number of successes with arrests of people, some as far afield as Cardiff, and they've been extremely organised and have come fully equipped to carry out these thefts.
Jackie eventually got the money to refill her tank, but disaster struck for a second time.
When we ordered a fresh batch of oil, we realised that the heavy frost had cracked the pipework underneath the joint had gone, and my oil again was pouring out of the tank as quickly as it had been pumped back in.
We're quite certain on about the 2nd or 3rd of January there was a van in the area with a description of a scruffy Mercedes van, maybe off-white, possibly a P registration, and that individual came to the premises here and was asking about having the windows cleaned. Certainly if somebody who knows of that van or saw that van in the area around about the first few days of January, we'd like them to contact us, because obviously that's a line of inquiry we must follow.
It makes me feel very angry. Makes me feel very angry, actually, that they could come along and steal something from me. You know, if they put as much effort into doing a hard day's work, as they did, into stealing my oil, I'm sure they'd become responsible people. But they wouldn't know a good day's work if it jumped up and bit them in posterior, to be honest with you.
Those poor people, Penny.
Yes, really awful crime, Sophie, one that caused great hardship to a lovely couple. Well, PC Rob Chapman is back with us now. Is there someone you want to talk to in connection with this crime?
This crime happened Christmas New Year period, and we have had information that there was possibly a white van in the area, similar to a Mercedes Sprinter type van. Because of the time of year, he could have been delivering parcels, etc. But if that gentleman sees this appeal, then perhaps if he gives us a ring, we could speak to him and we could discount him from our inquiries regarding that crime.
Viewers might be surprised that people are going around the country stealing oil from people's tanks. How common is this type of robbery?
It was very common, credit crunch, beginning of the credit crunch, winter last year, obviously when people are using their fuel. The price of fuel went up incredibly, and people were stealing it. It was a valuable commodity to steal.
Now, looking behind us here, this is the Hall's tank. It's protected by a cage. But what can people do in their homes to protect their oil from thieves?
That is a great example of how to protect a tank. Ideally, in your own home, you wouldn't want a metal frame, but something simple like put some gravel around the base of the tank, which makes a noise when somebody walks on it. Put some trellis work around the actual tank, set it off about a metre, and put plants up growing around that trellis. Ideally, you want to disguise the tank from the roadway and from people seeing it. The summer months now are ideal, and if people use the summer to try and look at the security of their tank and enhance that security, it's because when the winter comes and people start switching on their boilers and the fuel is being used again, this crime can start up again.
And should people be on the lookout for people snooping around their houses?
Absolutely. I mean, if you see somebody, these are all about communities, and if you see somebody, a stranger, that's looking over fences and paying particular attention to people's gardens, then yeah, absolutely, give us a ring. We need that information, and what we don't want to happen is somebody becoming a further victim of crime of these types of thefts.
PC Rob Chapman, thanks very much. Lots of tips there, Sophie, from Cumtoch. Back to you in the studio.
Penny, thank you very much. And thank you so much to everybody who's called in already today. Lots of calls about cannabis farms and people who think they have the telltale signs of a cannabis farm next door to them. One in Exeter, one in Leicester, one in Warwickshire, one in Colchester already this morning. Do keep calling if you have any more information on that. We'll pass all those details to the police. We've also had 2 sightings on our most wanted faces. We're not obviously going to show you which one for rather obvious reasons. And a sighting of somebody we showed you at the bookies on CCTV. Do keep your calls coming, though. And let's go back to Rav. What have you got on tomorrow's show, Rav?
Well, tomorrow, Sophie, I'm going to be live from the scene of this vicious attack.
It was 11:30 on Wednesday the 6th of May when the victim left his home to go to the supermarket. It seemed to be the beginning of a normal day, but just moments later he'd be violently assaulted and seriously injured.
Well, Rav will tell you lots more about that on tomorrow's programme, but please do keep your calls coming. The lines are open all day. From all of us, though, goodbye for now. See you tomorrow.